Hello everybody, Daria here, and welcome to episode number 95 of the Slow Russian Language Podcast. I can't believe I'm finally here, and it's almost ridiculous at this point to promise that I'm gonna upload episodes regularly once a week. Yeah, I promise. Not this time, because every time I do that, it's like 5 month break. So, not gonna say anything, just let's dive into our content. I have been asking my listeners many times what you would like to listen about. And one of the most requested episodes, surprisingly to me, was composers. Russian composers. So I've decided to talk about my personal favorite first, and I'm sure you know him. It's Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky. You probably heard about the Swan Lake, about the Nutcracker. So today we speak about this wonderful composer, just a brief biography, because our goal here is mainly the Russian language, not Russian culture. However, let's talk, and at the ending I will try to insert the excerpt from the Swan Lake. And I apologize in advance for my hard breathing, because I'm on my 9th month of pregnancy already, so I'm so out of breath. There's literally no space for my lungs anymore. So I'm really sorry if I'm like, yeah, I apologize. Please have some mercy. Okay, as usual, first I read the whole text out loud slowly, and then we translate it sentence by sentence and try to find some interesting vocabulary and grammatical structures. Here we go. В возрасте 5 лет Пётр начал учиться играть на фортепиано. В 1865 году Чайковский окончил с отличием консерваторию. Получил диплом и серебряную медаль. В Москве в 1866 году Чайковский сочинил первую симфонию под названием «Зимние, грезы» и первую оперу «Воевода». Композитор стал новатором в области балета, где главным компонентом балетной драматургии стала музыка. Он создал балеты «Лебединое озеро», «Спящая красавица», «Щелкунчик». 6 ноября 1893 года композитор скончался от холеры. Он похоронен в Александро-Невской лавре в Санкт-Петербурге. So that was the slow version. At the very end, I will read it again a little bit faster after you understand the meaning of all the sentences. So now let's get back and translate it sentence by sentence. At the age of 5, Peter began to learn to play the piano. В возрасте 5 лет Пётр начал учиться играть на фортепиано. First of all, let's start with his name. You know the name Peter in English, but in Russian we usually don't say Peter. It's a literal translation from the Latin version of this name. For example, the movie and the book Peter the Rabbit. Yes, in Russian it would be Кролик Питер. Кролик Питер, Peter the Rabbit. But Russian people who name their children, they would use the name Пётр. And the disciple Peter in Russian would be apostol Pёtr. And our first emperor, Peter the Great, would be Пётр Великий, Пётр. So it's not Peter in Russian. The phrase at the age of something something we use with the genitive case. В возрасте пяти. So it's not 5 лет, but after в возрасте, at the age, we would use 5 лет. And then we have an interesting triple combo of verbs. He started to learn to play. Начал учиться, играть. Начал, past tense. He started, he began to do something. We use infinitive. Учиться and to play, играть. Don't forget that in Russian, with musical instruments, we use the preposition на. To play the guitar would be играть на гитаре with a prepositional case. Here we have the piano. So in Russian, there are 2 ways of saying piano. Pianino, but the official name would be like here in the text, fortepiano. Fortepiano. This is a combination of 2 musical terms, forte и piano. Fortepiano. I'm sure musicians know what I'm talking about. So, в возрасте 5 лет Пётр начал учиться играть на фортепиано. The next sentence. In 1865, Tchaikovsky graduated with honors from the conservatory. В 1865 году Чайковский окончил с отличием консерваторию. Let's not dwell on the dates too much. We spoke about them many times in the previous episodes. So, 1000, 1000, then we go to hundreds, 800, 800s, 60, 60, and 5, 5. And when in English you say graduate from somewhere, in Russian we say finish the university, finish the school, finish the college. So we use this verb окончить or закончить. You can use both. Окончить университет, окончить школу, окончить колледж. We use it with the accusative case. So he graduated from the conservatory. In Russian, it's basically the same word, консерватория, but again, we put it in the accusative case. Окончил консерваторию. We change the ending. With honors would be с отличием, с отличием. He received diploma and a silver medal. Получил диплом и серебряную медаль. Серебряную медаль, accusative case, and diplom, accusative case. He received them. They are the direct objects. The next one. In Moscow in 1866, Tchaikovsky composed his first symphony, entitled Winter Dreams, and the first opera, Воевода. В Москве в 1866 году Чайковский сочинил первую симфонию под названием «Зимние грезы» и первую оперу «Воевода». That's a long sentence. Let's break it down a little bit. So, в Москве, in Moscow, prepositional case. Nothing new here, the «е» ending. However, let's speak about this в году, в 1866 году. Usually people ask, like, why don't you say в годе if we usually use the «е» ending in prepositional? There will be some exceptions, so basically you just remember those words. So, год, a year, в году, snow, снег, for example, in the snow, в снегу, on the floor, на полу, in the forest, в лесу, on the bridge, на мосту. So some words will have the ending u and not the ending ye. Okay, so Tchaikovsky composed his first symphony. Чайковский сочинил первую симфонию. Again, the word symphony, симфония, almost the same. The verb сочинить, it's not just about music to compose. You can, create a story, сочинить историю, or to make some poem, сочинить поэму. So it's about some creation. And the name of that symphony was Winter Dreams. Зимние грезы. Грезы is a very, very old school word, very old fashioned. So in modern everyday life, you probably wouldn't meet this. But in the names of different classical literature, of the music, classical music, this is very common. Грезы. Грезы. It's like daydreams. Winter daydreams. Зимние грезы. And his first opera, Воевода, первую оперу. Again, we put this word into the accusative case. Первую оперу. That's why it's the U ending. The word Воевода is the very old Russian. It was the military general. So somebody who leads the army. Воевоda. And actually, after the premiere, he destroyed his work. I think he burned all the notes. And much, much later, this opera was resurrected by some of his followers after his death. The next part. The composer became an innovator in the field of ballet. Композитор стал новатором в области балета. And again, I love how a lot of old school Russian people complain about how we're damaging our language. It is insane. You should get rid of all the English words of today. You know, this whole social media culture has brought a lot of English words to the Russian language. But look at this. Композитор, новатор, балет, компонент, драма, музыка. Which one of those words, excuse me, is originally Russian? So I don't know. Every time I hear somebody complaining about this stuff, for example, my dad loves to complain about how we are butchering modern Russian language. So I tell him, like, what are you even talking about? At this point, it's ridiculous. So the composer became an innovator. Композитор стал новатором. Novator is someone who creates something new, something that didn't exist before. Novator. In the field of ballet. В области балета. We put the word ballet into the genitive case. In English, you usually show it with the of preposition. Field of ballet. In Russian, you use genitive. В области балета. Where music became the main component of ballet drama. Где музыка стала главным компонентом балетной драматургии. So here we have the full word драматургия. And the main component would be главный компонент. He created the ballets Swan Lake, 1876, The Sleeping Beauty, 1889, and The Nutcracker, 1892. Those are 3 gems of his work. Он создал балеты «Лебединое озеро», «Спящая красавица» и «Щелкунчик». So Swan Lake, we say «Лебединое озеро. This is an incredible masterpiece for all times. It was one of my dreams, actually, to go and see this ballet finally, and I had a chance to do it in St. Petersburg. But of course, the number one place to do it would be the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow. It's quite pricey, but it's totally worth it. Totally worth it. So if you are in Russia, make sure to go. And the sad part in the ending, on November 6, 1893, the composer died of cholera. 6 ноября 1893 года композитор скончался от холеры. In this sentence, I want you to remember the word скончаться. It is a very polite synonym of the word to die. Умирать. You could say композитор умер, but it's just more official, sounds better to say скончаться. It's just like in English, just simply to say to die or to say he passed away, for example. So in Russian, композитор скончался. And again, in English, you would use the of cholera. Am I pronouncing it correctly? Cholera, very dangerous disease, especially in the 19th century when they didn't know how to treat it properly. In Russian, it's холера, and we put it into the genitive case. От холеры. Скончался от холеры. He was buried at the Alexandro-Nevsky Lavra in St. Petersburg. Он похоронен в Александро-Невской лавре в Санкт-Петербурге. Похоронен is buried. If you want to make it feminine, for example, some woman is buried, you simply add a. Похоронена. And this Alexandro-Nevsky Lavra is a great cemetery to visit. If you're in St. Petersburg, you just walk at the very, very end of the Nevsky Prospect, and there you see this museum cemetery. A lot of Russian composers, writers, anyone who is connected to culture, they are buried there. Very interesting place. So make sure to visit if you go to St. Petersburg. And basically that's it for the text. Now let's get to the very, very beginning and let me read it again to you in normal speed. So this time, hopefully, you will understand more. Here we go. В возрасте 5 лет Пётр начал учиться играть на фортепиано. В 1865 году Чайковский окончил с отличием консерваторию, получил диплом и серебряную медаль. В Москве в 1866 году Чайковский сочинил первую симфонию под названием «Зимние грезы» и первую оперу «Воевода». Композитор стал новатором в области балета, где главным компонентом балетной драматургии стала музыка. Он создал балеты «Лебединое озеро», «Спящая красавица» и «Щелкунчик». 6 ноября 1893 года композитор скончался от холеры. Он похоронен в Александро-Невской лавре в Санкт-Петербурге. That's it. Now I will try to add some works of Tchaikovsky at the ending, and I really hope that I won't be punished for using it. It's just such a beautiful piece of music. I am in love with Tchaikovsky. In terms of practicing your Russian, it will be great if you go to the show notes of this episode and you just look through the text. Perfectly read the text out loud yourself. So don't just listen to it. If you actually look at the words, if you read them yourself, and if you try to retell the text, this will boost the benefits from this episode listening to the highest highest level. So make sure to put more effort than just listening. And I guess that was it for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you in the next episode of the Slow Russian Language Podcast. Bye-bye.